Everyone, thanks for coming out. This is a journey into the Metaverse, exploring VR as a social medium. We have a lot to cover today, so we're just going to get right into it. My name is William.
Hello, my name is David. Nice to meet you guys.
Hello, William and
Alright, so we've decided to give our presentation in a program called VR Chat, which is the leading social experience in the Metaverse. Today, we're going to explain a little bit about what VR Chat is, talk about virtual reality hardware, and most importantly, what is the Metaverse, and how we've used virtual reality and VR Chat specifically as a tool for social engagement. Now, due to the format, mostly our inability to see you without removing our headsets, we're going to save all questions till the end, so just hold off until then. Thanks.
Yeah, and you guys may have noticed that today's presentation is a little atypical, right? You know, you might be asking yourself, what are these guys doing? Why do we look like cartoons? And how can I join in? So we'll be talking about all of that today.
Alright, so if you've been paying attention to Hollywood since the mid-90s, you've probably seen all sorts of weird stuff when it comes to depiction of virtual reality in the 21st century. Now these depictions, they vary wildly between the plausible and fantastic. For example, Lawnmower Man saw the Metaverse as a way to expand human consciousness and intelligence. Alternatively, Johnny Mnemonic viewed it simply as a means for accessing information in websites. Now, Ready Player One treats it as a replacement for real life, as their society is in decline. Now, incidentally, Ready Player One most closely resembles the original idea of the Metaverse. The term Metaverse was coined by author Neil Stephenson in his 1992 book Snow Crash. Now, in this classic cyberpunk novel, Neil describes it as such. So, he's not actually here at all. He's in a computer-generated universe that his computer is drawing onto his goggles and plugging into his earphones. In the lingo, this imaginary place is known as the Metaverse. He spends a lot of time in the Metaverse. It beats the shit out of real life. Now, this is a great novel and we highly recommend it. Although the dystopian Snow Crash is a bit tongue-in-cheek, there are some very interesting parallels in the novel as it pertains to corporate overreach and control of the Metaverse, and also by extension society. We're going to touch a little more on this later. So, for the purpose of this presentation, we're just going to define the Metaverse as a collaborative virtual world. Now, all the media portrayals aside, the Metaverse does exist today. There are many rich worlds and experience that you can access right now. So we'd like to tell you about what platforms are out there, our personal experience with the Metaverse, and how you can take part. But before we can tell you our story, it's important to discuss the history of modern VR and the hardware and software that makes it possible.
Yeah, so if we look back almost a decade, specifically at the mobile phone market, we can see the beginnings of the modern VR revolution. Processors, high-resolution displays, accelerometers, and other components had all been shrinking in size since the early 2000s, mostly thanks to companies like Apple and Samsung pushing out newer and smaller mobile phones every year. Now, in addition to getting smaller, these chips are also getting a lot cheaper thanks to economies of scale and commoditization of parts. So as it turns out, the same technology that your mobile phones use to detect if it's facing up or down, can also work great to determine if someone's head is looking left or right. And now if you take a mobile phone screen, you attach some lenses to it, you can simulate 3D images and follow the movement of the user's head. So if you pair all this technology together, it wasn't long before VR enthusiasts started experimenting with this cheap technology. And in 2013, a small company named Oculus put those chips and lenses in a headset and released their first VR prototype, the DK1. I actually bought one of those things that year. It seems like a long time ago. So in those days, back in 2013, the technology was absolutely in its infancy. The headsets were low resolution, bulky, they often made the users motion sick, but when they did work, they were very, very cool. You really actually did feel like you were immersed in a virtual world. So fast forward about a year or so, Oculus iterating on it, and in 2014, the DK2 addressed many of the initial shortcomings of the DK1, and it proved that the technology was finally mature enough to support VR. Up to this point though, there are actually no consumer-grade VR hardware available. The DK1 and DK2 actually stood for development kits, but that all changed in March of 2016 when Oculus released the Oculus Rift, which was the first modern consumer headset to make it to market. Now, even though the hardware had arrived at this point, there was surprisingly little software to use on it, and there was certainly no Metaverse as we would call it today. Thus far, VR hardware had mostly been marketed as a gaming device, so most of the experiences at that point were in that space. Now, the good news is that once the Oculus Rift was released, there was an explosion of software development that started for VR. And over the next few years, some pretty transformative experiences were released. Now, as far as like the Metaverse, social VR, during that time, a lot of applications were starting in earnest, such as VR Chat, Rec Room, and Alt Space VR. At that time, it was incredibly small and niche, so it would be at least 2 more years before William and I even tried it out.
So, as I mentioned earlier, the Metaverse exists today. There are several platforms and companies all competing for dominance in the space, and they all offer different takes on the future of social VR. Now, out of all these platforms, there are really only 3 major players. So, the first one, now even though they were the first one to market, Rec Room is the smallest, with about 3,000 concurrent users. They primarily target younger audiences with more games and sports-related content, and their world creation tools, while very easy to use, are somewhat limited. Now, the newest player in the space is Facebook Horizon Worlds. We were unable to get reliable data on player count, but they are far and away the most fiscally dominant company. They're investing billions of dollars in both hardware and software, so it's likely they might buy their way to first place in the next few years. Now, even though right now, like, their version of the Metaverse is very corporate and sanitized. Now, the largest of the 3 is VR Chat, with about 20 to 25,000 concurrent users. They have the most advanced world-building tools, although the learning curve can be steep for new creators. In our opinion, they are the platform with the truest representation of the Metaverse, which is why it's our favorite. So, in a theoretical Metaverse, you really should be able to do anything you can do in real life. Now, in practice, considering the limits of today's technology, the experience is a little bit more constrained. So, of the 5 senses, current technology lets us experience 2 of them quite well. Almost all the research has been focused on audio and visual. But engineers are starting to look at the remaining 3 senses, and initial work is well underway. Though it'll probably be a couple more years before we see first generation products. So the next promising field in interactivity is locomotion, which is more commonly known as walking. In VR, within your play space, you're free to walk and move as you normally would, but any movement outside of that relies on video game mechanics, such as joystick and teleportation, like you see here on the slide. Now, there is current technology on the market which does give you infinite movement, such as the Catwalk C or the Virtuix Omni. These devices are known as slide mills, and they utilize a low-friction shoe on a concave platform to simulate walking. Now, the feeling, it's not as natural as true locomotion, so other companies are still researching more viable tech, similar to what you see here in Ready Player One. This tech is still many years off though, so don't get your hopes up quite yet. So there is one additional technical limitation we feel needs mentioning, especially because it has both negative and positive implications. So while in VR Chat there may be 20,000 people online at any given time, due to limits in network capacity, you won't be able to interact with more than about 80 to 100 at once in any given world. So VR Chat groups users into things called instances. For those of you who played MMORPGs like World of Warcraft, you're already familiar with this concept. For those of you who haven't, these are just simply copies of worlds. Now, the benefit to this is that you're in control of who joins your world and how many people you choose to interact with. If you like meeting strangers, you can make your world public, see who joins, or you're free to join somebody else's public world. If you feel like just hanging out with your friends and keeping the guest list small, you make the world private and send out invites. Basically whatever you're comfortable with. Now, in spite of the technical limitations, the current Metaverse is a very rich and compelling environment. In our time in VR Chat, we've experienced many types of worlds catering to many different experiences. Here you can see some very beautiful chill hangout worlds. These are incredibly popular in VR Chat. Users will come here when they just want to relax with their close friends. Now, alternatively, when users are looking for like a night out on the town, they'll frequent clubs and dance floors such as these. Now, some users who are looking for a more cerebral experience will explore various psychedelic environments. These experiences vary wildly, but we've shown a couple of the more popular ones. Now, racing and flight sims are always a popular choice for people looking for an adventure. Personally, I'm a huge fan of flight sims, like it really feels like you're in the cockpit. And then of course for gamers out there, the choices are almost limitless. Here you can see a few examples of what's available. We've got a D&D role-playing world, chess, mini golf, the list really goes on. So now these worlds, they're only half the equation. The users and how they express themselves, play a large part in bringing life to the metaverse. For example, David here, he's chosen to express himself using something really close to his real face, but appearing as a Victorian-era vampire with bitchin' blue hair. I, on the other hand, have just decided to keep my basic appearance, just a little cyberpunk kind of theme. Now, all of this expressiveness has actually had a bunch of unintended consequences of inclusiveness. You can be whatever you want in the metaverse. And as Neil Stephenson writes in Snow Crash, your avatar can look any way you want it to, up to the limitations of your equipment. If you're ugly, you can make your avatar beautiful. If you've just gotten out of bed, your avatar can still be wearing beautiful clothes and professionally applied makeup. You can look like a gorilla, a dragon, or a giant talking penis in the metaverse. Spend 5 minutes walking down the street and you will see all of these. It is worth noting that VR chat technically doesn't allow nudity. Sorry if this is a disappointment to anyone. So, due to this freedom, VR chat has actually become a safe space for expression of identity. It's been particularly beneficial for members of the LGBTQIA+ and furry communities. Now, this is a very expansive topic that deserves more time than we have today. So at the end of the presentation, we're going to be sharing links to resources that will cover that in greater detail. Another added benefit of VR chat is its support for accessibility. With the aid of various avatar creation tools, as well as just improved hand tracking, both deaf and hard of hearing users are able to communicate via sign language or simply writing with pens. In fact, there's actually a large hard of hearing and deaf community that teaches sign language in VR chat. So, when you look at these capabilities and all the freedoms at hand, you can see why it's appealing and why people immerse themselves in it. So now that you know a little bit more about what the metaverse is, we'd actually like to tell you about our personal experience with it.
Yeah, so probably like many of you, we spent the first few months of COVID searching for ways to interact with our friends and family. At first, we attempted Discord movie nights and Zoom happy hours, but both of these failed to provide meaningful social interaction. In reality, we felt isolated or like we were still at a work meeting. So while exploring these options, I'd actually also been exploring VR chat. I first logged on in November of 2019, and I'd been slowly making friends and inroads into the current metaverse. So William and I were discussing the Zoom problem, and I mentioned that the friends I was making all over the world and the fun I was having doing it. And we thought, this might be a way to improve the poor social interactions we were having with our friends in the real world, but unfortunately at that time, only 1 or 2 of my friends had the necessary hardware even required, so we tabled that discussion until the next time that we met up. So let's fast forward a little bit to July 2020, rolls around. I'm sure everyone remembers that DragonCon had to make its very sad announcement about going virtual for 2020. Now, usually at this point of the year, we'd already be working on costumes or thinking about working on costumes. But between the announcement, the lack of a cosplay project, and the months of disappointing Zoom calls, William and I decided, now we've had enough, we're gonna hang out for the weekend. So, trying to make the best of our situation, we started brainstorming how we could make the most of DragonCon Goes Virtual. Now, immediately, 2 problems became clear to us, right? It wouldn't be con without our friends, and it wouldn't be con without our community. So, friends turned out to be the really easy part, right? We could quarantine and isolate before Labor Day and meet up in a small group and experience virtual con together at my house. The second problem was much more difficult. Now, while DragonCon did an amazing job creating the Discord server, there were things we were looking for that would be impossible for them to provide. For example, one of William's favorite moments in con every year is that first ride of the escalator in the Marriott atrium. Hearing the crowd noise and the anticipation building, and as cool as Discord was, there was no way that they could provide that. So, recalling our previous conversations about how immersive VR chat is, we thought, it might be time. VR might provide a solution. So, we had 3 weeks left until con. We had 0 experience building VR world at all. and we had a cosplayer's hubris. So we decided to bring DragonCon to the metaverse.
That's the funny part.
Right? So DragonCon goes virtual, literally, this thing's gonna kill me. Okay, so how does one encapsulate the experience of DragonCon in the metaverse? Well, that's the neat part. You can't. The best you can do is just build a slice of it. Now, for us as cosplayers who've always been lapping the Marriott atrium for over a decade, this was the slice that we wanted to focus on. So naturally, we decided, well, we'll just model the Marriott marquee in virtual reality. And now, just to understand exactly how underprepared we were for that task, it might be useful to know a little bit about your presenters. So William and I have been longtime con attendees, probably like a lot of you guys here, right? I've been going since 2009, whereas William's actually been attending since the late 90s, back when we were teenagers. A yearly cosplay has been a tradition for us since we started going. As you can see on the screen, we've had quite a few wonderful con experiences. I'm sure you guys have similar experiences. And as a group, we usually pick some theme and roll with it. You can see our love of video games. You can see, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, some Final Fantasy. And if we go back in time, William and I have been friends since middle school. This is one of our very first projects for a mythology class in 9th grade. If we go back to 2011, we decided one year to make a full-scale Buster sword out of fiberglass. That was a lot of fun. And then, the last 6 or 7 years, here's some of the few cosplays that we've been working on. And I think this is actually really cool. So William has been designing a large-scale 3D printer from scratch to help, build our increasingly complex cosplay. And then one thing that I think is pretty cool is one year we decided to make some party masks to stand out in the late night rave scene. So, we took some Soldier 76 and Overwatch stuff and just kind of went crazy with it. So during all these years we've been working together, we've been cosplayers, makers, craftsmen, programmers, but never video game developers, which is, the essential skill you need to make a VR world. Now, we did have a little bit going for us. I've got a computer science degree from the University of Georgia, and I've spent most of my career as a programmer. And William has a background in construction and architectural 3D modeling. And then this super weird stroke of luck, William's actually renovated most of the host hotels, including the Marriott. So
All right. So we had built this world, but nobody knew about it. So we needed to make DragonCon aware that it existed. Now we didn't know any of the DragonCon staff, but thanks to some Facebook stalking by David, we were able to find and contact the media director for DragonCon. So somehow all the stars aligned. Not only did they receive the video, but they loved it and showed it to some of the other leadership. At this point, they actually posted it to the official DragonCon Twitter just a day or two before the convention was set to start. So Labor Day weekend rolls around. We've got 7 people at David's house. The USS Draco is live. a proper shout out from DragonCon. We had 4 VR headsets and several friends actually remotely joining us in VR. And we'd even organized a couple of virtual meetups at Draco to party with our DragonCon community.
Are you very great at this, man?
Oh yeah, overall, this was a great success.
That's someone who's fully immersed in VR, right?
Yeah. Now, as you can see, with the aid of Draco, we actually get our friends excited about it and sell them on the value of virtual reality. So, late September, after the DragonCon hangover had worn off, and reality had set in that we were in for a very long COVID winter, several of our friends who had had the opportunity to try VR at David's house they just bought their own hardware. So this really motivated David and myself to start thinking about new ways to leverage the metaverse to keep our friend group connected. So we decided to put a new spin on an old idea, movie nights. So to make this work, we needed to feel like we were there together in the same room. So we came up with the idea of just a virtual communal space where we could connect casually. So, in a limitless world with zero constraints, the best things our millennial brains could come up with was to build an affordable 2-bedroom, 2-bath condo. So David and myself, we set out to use our newfound fledgling world creation skills, to build a home for our friends and ourselves. And since we finished it around the holidays, since we finished it around Halloween, we decided to decorate for the holidays. Oh, all right. So I don't remember what the first movie was, but I'm certain it was scary, cheesy, and everybody loved it. We actually had about 10 people, all in VR, sitting together on a virtual couch, just interacting as we normally would. Jeering at the movie, making fun of the characters and their terrible choices. It felt normal. And we actually felt normal for the first time in quite a while. So one of the benefits of meeting in VR that we actually hadn't anticipated was that it lowered the barrier of entry to getting together. Without the added friction of physically traveling, it almost became trivial to meet up virtually. And we actually ended up seeing a lot of our friends more often than we would have otherwise. All in all, the condo was a great success. It became a lifeline for us through the winter as a way to just stay in touch and feel like we were connected. It was so successful, in fact, that we ended up decorating for the Christmas season, as well as personalizing it with photos from our IRL events. We even threw a pool table up on the 2nd floor so we could just relax and shoot the breeze. The condo culminated in New Year's of 2020. Since we still couldn't meet in person, we decided to throw a party in VR, which resulted in a spectacular firework display on the roof of the condo at midnight.
Yeah, so with the successes of 2020 behind us, I started to realize for me that this was more than just a way to survive COVID. I know I'd always been an early adopter of VR hardware, but this was the first time that I truly saw a future in the metaverse, and I personally was fully committed to being a part of this social experiment, wherever it led. So I started spending more and more time in VR, not just as a creator, but as a participant, consumer, citizen, whatever term would be appropriate. I spent my nights exploring the various worlds, experiences, and the communities that populate them. In real life, people tend to group themselves around interests and activities, and the metaverse is no different. One of the most well-developed subcultures I discovered VR chat is the electronic music scene. Now, I don't have an exact number, but I would guess that there are between 2,000 and 3,000 people that make up this community across the globe. They're highly organized, and in a lot of ways, they mirror the club scene of the real world. For example, there are creators that build digital clubs. Some of them attempt to capture the realism of an underground warehouse rave. Some of them strive to depict fantastic settings and locales. You see here on the screen, this one's called The Tube, and it's set inside a large glass tube with an ocean of lights and effects surrounding it. I really like this one here. This is an over-the-top neon retro arcade. Actually, one of my friends is in that shot right there. This one is set on a fantasy beach called Fish Person's Cove. So there's a lot of cool creativity out there for these worlds. And in addition to just the world creators, there are also promoters who run Discord servers and artists who produce flyers and posters. If we look back just a couple of weeks, these are some of the events and parties that were going on. So if you have a bad avatar, they'll make you change or they'll kick you out. And then obviously, last but not least, are the DJs, right? So they have various ways that they choose to interact with their audiences. On this screen, we can see we've got a DJ who spins in cross reality events. So you can either choose to participate in a real life club or in the metaverse, and they can interact with each other. So on the top picture, you can see there are people in VR, and they have a live feed of people in a club, and then the opposite's true on the other side. So there's a little bit of delay, and the technology is still in its infancy, but it's really neat. You can just sort of blend worlds together. So if you combine the events, the technology, the citizens, and the freedom of expression we've been talking about, you'll find yourself with a place that is super primed for socialization. The upshot of this is in the organic way in which you can meet people and the friends you can make along your journey. A prime example of this for me is one random Saturday night from November 2020. So I was at DDVR, which is a club I've been frequenting for the past couple of months. DDVR is one of the oldest clubs in the VR chat rave scene and one of the most social. So I was partying, I met a group of veteran users that night, and after that DJ finished, they invited me to World Hop with them to see another DJ and another club that I had yet to experience. I was actually pretty tired that night, but I figured, what the hell, I'll give it a try. So as I walked through the portal and the world finished loading, I found myself at the entrance to this large arena where a DJ named 10XX was already midway through his set. Now, I remembered instantly liking this DJ's music. For me, he was the best DJ I'd seen since I started exploring the virtual rave scene. So I spent the next hour dancing, making more friends, and really enjoying myself. After he finished his set, I remember turning to someone and saying something along the lines of, like, good luck following that up. In fact, it was only in the second hour of his set that I even caught myself realizing that I was, in fact, in my home office in pajamas. It was weird, but it didn't matter, right? It didn't matter. I felt like I was really there. So after that, I was super hooked on the community. I started following the DJs on social media, and I started attending all of their events. A couple of weeks later, I even got the opportunity to talk to 10XX, that first DJ, after one of his sets, and we instantly hit it off. So in the metaverse, you can actually talk to the DJs after their sets are done. They're not whisked away by security, right? So anyway, over the following months, I started making friends with other 10XX fans, and in March 2021, 10XX had enough followers and fans that he created an official community for us in the metaverse, lovingly referring to us as the 10XX Army. So you can see on the screen here, these are the founding members of the Army, and this was drawn by one of the members who's a really good artist. And you can see the various crazy different avatars, but we're all still friends. Now, as of this presentation, even though there's just maybe 10, 15 of us on the screen, there's actually over 800 members in the community, and it's continuing to grow every day, right? So, for nearly 2 years, we've been members of this global community, strengthening relationships and making new friends. And unlike the real world, the metaverse has no physical boundaries, right? So many of the friends we made were thousands of miles away, spanning oceans and continents. Most of them were behind borders we weren't even allowed to cross due to COVID. So when we finally got the opportunity to meet up in the real world, we had to take it. Now I gotta do a screen change, so you guys hang tight. Okay, do we look full screen, you guys?
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Okay, so it was May this year that 10XX pulled me aside after one of his shows, and he told me he had a secret to share. It wasn't officially announced yet, but the following month in June, he'd be flying from his home country of Austria all the way to Canada to go play at a real-life festival. And did he think we could make it since we were so close? I had to remind him, as a European, that Atlanta was roughly 900 miles from Canada's border. But we're like, yeah, of course, we'll figure it out, we'll make it. So as it turns out, with Canada recently opening up their borders, our friend and fellow 10XX fan, Dot Local is his name, he saw an opportunity, and he worked with the city's local drum and bass community and got 10XX a slot at the festival. Incidentally, this would be 10XX's first international gig, so we absolutely couldn't miss it.
Okay. All right, so June comes around, we load up the truck, and we head north to meet our friends for the first time. Everything was going great until we got to the Canadian border. So we had spent this whole trip, being worried that we'd fail a COVID test or something at the border, but we actually never anticipated what the actual issue was.
Here, mic up. There you go.
Thank you. All right, now my mouth should be moving. So we get up to the border checkpoint, and the border guard starts questioning us with all the usual stuff. What's the purpose of your trip? Where are you going? Who are you meeting? These questions were easy enough, But the follow-up question, how do you know this person, was a little bit more tricky. So answering truthfully, David was like, we've been hanging out in virtual reality for some time now. And she gets a little suspicious, eyebrow raises, and she's like, VR? And we're like, yeah, just online friends. So she immediately is like, all right, well, how old is he? Have you met him before? Giving us, grilling us, and we're kind of trying to laugh it off. And David's like, no, he's in his mid-30s. Now, this will be the first time we've met in real life. Nobody looks like, I've been hanging out with him for over a year. So she's like asking more questions, and she's like, all right, so VR, which site are you using? So we tell her about VR chat, and she immediately just starts Googling. So after several very tense minutes of silence, she actually just started laughing out loud and waved us on through. In retrospect, this might have been a really good opportunity to just lie. So all right, so we make it past the checkpoint, and we finally meet up with 10XX and .local. And we had an interesting realization. Because their voices and body language matched up perfectly to what we'd seen in VR, it actually didn't feel like a first meeting at all. Just another night in the metaverse with much better avatars. Yes, much higher. The resolution was fantastic. So, all right, so the next several days were just a blur of electronic music and festivities. But one takeaway was just the similarity of attending 10XX's shows in real life versus VR's. We'd already seen them DJ in dozens of virtual venues, but this time, there's some differences, we couldn't control the volume of the club. But we had the benefit of actually being able to touch each other and clink glasses. So as this trip is coming to an end, we got one final dinner together. And during the meal, it came up that this festival is one that .local looks forward to attending each year. So we made a little offhand comment, well, if you like big giant annual parties, we might have something you'd be interested in. So actually, it turns out he was, as he's here today in the audience with us. And actually, in fact, when another mutual friend in the Metaverse overheard us planning the DragonCon, he decided to come along as well. So you guys raise your hands. This is Dot and Potato. This is their very first con, so let's try to show.
Now, obviously, we wouldn't be up here giving the panel if we were enthusiastic about the technology and the potential of the metaverse. Spending a large percentage of our socialization hours in VR, we often find ourselves at real-life events struggling to kind of properly convey to people what we were experiencing the night before. So we frequently get asked the same kind of questions about VR and the metaverse, some of which we've already addressed for you, some of the basic ones, but we do get some other interesting questions that we'd like to kind of talk about now.
All right, so the first one is, basically just where are these people located? Who are you hanging out with?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, the metaverse is global, so I meet people from all over the world, but weirdly enough, that's actually been one of the coolest and most compelling features of VR. So instead of having to buy a plane ticket to fly to another country to meet locals and partake in their culture, I can do that from the comfort of my own home.
So nextly we usually get asked, is this for adults? What about children? How does that work?
Yeah. So personally, I spend my time hanging out with adults in private instances, but there is a large population of teens. Like a lot of internet websites in the Western Hemisphere, there's a minimum age limit of 13 to join. So they're running around living their best life. But for me, just like in real life, the clubs I frequent are actually 18 plus, and they enforce that heavily. So if they suspect someone is underage, they'll kick them right out of the club.
So the next one we get asked is, how do you deal with annoying or bothersome people?
Yeah, one of the cooler things about the metaverse is that VR chat has moderation tools just for this purpose. So the most passive one is to turn on what's called personal space mode. So if someone gets too close to you, their avatar just sort of dissolves into pieces, But it's good, they can't just freak you out in your face. Now, if you want to be more direct with someone who's kind of being annoying or loud, you can literally turn the volume down on people individually, or you can mute them entirely. If someone is continually harassing you, there is a block option, and what it does is it makes it to where you both disappear from each other, so it's like you just both cease to exist. In practice, though, people only use blocking as a last resort. We generally prefer other means of de-escalation, but it is available if you need it.
All right, so let's talk about the clubs a little bit more for a bit. Like how much does it cost to attend something like this?
Yeah, so unlike real life clubs, there are no cover charges. The DJs are actually playing for free, but that doesn't mean they don't get paid. So they utilize a mixture of Twitch, Patreon, and sometimes direct donations. So a really popular DJ in the Metaverse can make several hundred or several $1,000s a month, depending on the size of their audience.
So how exactly do you dance in VR? And do you feel silly doing it alone in your room?
Yeah. So you guys can see up here, all modern VR headsets on the market today, you've only seen our head and our hands move, right? My legs don't do anything right now. They only just track hand and heads right now. So your legs are effectively simulated by the software, or like in the case of Facebook's. So at my age, I generally prefer VR over real life, but it does offer many quality of life improvements over the real thing. So for example,
discussing, the first one is the Quest 2 from Facebook, and the second is the Index from Market. Right now it's about $1,000. This is a significant investment, especially if this is your first time in VR. It's not a standalone headset, which means you also need a powerful gaming PC to run it. Now on the plus side, its tracking system is compatible with full body sensor upgrades. It supports a higher level of hand dexterity compared to the Quest, as well as having a wider field of view, covering about 130 degrees compared to just 90 for the Quest 2. One other thing to consider is that the Index is a wired-only headset, but there are many creative ways, to manage the wire. A lot of which you can buy, a lot of clever DIY solutions out there as well. So ultimately, it really just comes down to budget, especially if you have to factor in the cost of a gaming PC. The headsets we're wearing today are both Quests, though we've heavily modified them with aftermarket upgrades. You see battery packs on there and various comfort pieces. David, he prefers wireless is very important to him. So that's why he's chosen the Quest headsets in spite of them being a little inferior. It really just depends on your priority. The hardware is constantly changing, but as of today, the simplest solution is to just get a Quest 2. So with the hardware out of the way, the next thing is software. And this is actually really simple at this point. Whichever platform you choose, it's just as simple as going to the website, setting up a user account, downloading the software. We obviously recommend VR Chat, but as we've mentioned, there are several other options out there like Rec Room, Chill Out VR, and Neos VR. Once again, we're going to share links to these resources at the end of the presentation.
So the last thing we want to talk to you about today is the future of the Metaverse, which if anybody tells you what it is, they don't know. No one knows yet, right? But we can take a guess. We will say that it's changing day to day, and one thing we're certain of is that monetization is going to change it even more. But for example, like during last year's keynote speech about virtual reality, Mark Zuckerberg was quoted as saying, "I believe that the Metaverse is the next chapter of the internet. Just like we had the mobile internet, I think this is going to be the successor to that." Now, that sounds a little idealistic, but from Mark's perspective, his motivations are purely financial. In the mobile internet he was talking about, Mark had to play by Google and Apple's rules to get Facebook in front of a billion mobile phones. And he wants to make sure that doesn't happen ever again, so he's pumping tens of billions of dollars into the VR market, subsidizing the Quest 2 and the hardware so that he controls the platform this time around. A good way to think of it is, he's trying to make the Metaverse a giant marketplace, and Facebook's going to act as the bank. So make no mistake about this is a total land grab. Facebook is far from the first to market, but they are trying to use their size and position in the market to dominate the competition before they even have a chance to grow. In fact, even though we've been referring to the company as Facebook this entire presentation, they actually changed their name to Meta in 2021 as a pretty shrewd attempt to leverage recognition of the term Metaverse and put themselves at the center of the conversation. But as much as I'm dogging on them, they're not the only corporation trying to monetize the Metaverse. Even VR Chat is trying to make an in-game marketplace. VR Chat's still a small startup, and they're relying on venture capital money, which won't last forever. So they've got to find a way to, be profitable if they're going to survive. And as we all know, profit comes with strings, and investors get nervous when someone like, say me, makes a Super Mario avatar for free and I upload it and anyone can download it. Now what happens when I want to start charging $100 for this service? I know we all know Nintendo's lawyers probably have some thoughts about that. So the community is rightly concerned about the end of freedom and creativity, kind of like what we had with the original internet from the late 90s, if any of you guys are old enough to remember, before Google and Facebook and Yahoo and all these guys came along, the internet was pretty, on dial-up, it was pretty wild, wild west. So that's probably going to come to an end with the next version of this, and something will emerge from it. Now, the bright spot in all of this is that as more and more people are joining, we as a community have the power to make it what we want. And that's going to become absolutely necessary that we exercise that power, or as Ernest Cline wrote in Ready Player One, if corporations take control, the metaverse will become a corporate-run dystopia, an overpriced theme park for wealthy elitists. In other words, it would become the real world. And since the metaverse is an escape from the real world, nobody wants that. So, one final thing. I know we've talked about a lot today. It was a very dense presentation. Many of the topics we discussed could have been their own panels. So as soon as I get this headset off, I'm going to put a QR code on the screen. If you want to take a picture of that, that's going to take you to a spreadsheet. It's going to have a lot of great resources, and you can dive in from there and then learn more. And on that note, anybody have any questions? Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
Your eyes look weird.
All right. Can I do my last question?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So, I don't know if you guys don't know about this, but I've been on VRChat more than likely. But I'll introduce myself. I'm Josh Savage. As you can tell from my badge and from my pin of mine, yes, I have been in VR quite a lot, from my perspective. I have been, we're not the only one that done the convention itself, but there is a virtual convention. It's called Virality.
Well, I've heard of Virality. We didn't have time to talk on it, but for those who don't know, Virality there's a large furry community in VRChat, and they actually partner with VRChat, and you can actually go to a full convention. It actually costs $10, and they have a really large party convention all weekend just for furries, which is fantastic, right? As we mentioned earlier, there is a lot of gender and identity that comes out that you get in the metaverse you wouldn't necessarily get here in the real world. And so this is just the beginning of conventions starting to either bring their convention entirely in the metaverse or do some sort of cross pollination. So excellent, that's awesome.
Now that people are kind of back in the real world, what's your experience with your friends who you got to join the virtual world? Are they still in it? Do you still do meetups? Is it less often? About the same?
Some of our friends probably do it less. They've just kind of gone back to the real world. But we have some of my friends who are in the audience today who love the experience. They bought hardware, and they might not necessarily go into VR chat, but they're doing a lot of games or puzzles or other experiences. So I'd say it's 50-50. But I think that it was a lifeline at the time. But for me, it was something I want to continue to do, and it's continuing to grow. Great question. We'll go there.
Do you speculate? How long do you speculate from now until Ready Player One?
I don't think it'll be in our lifetimes, if I'm being perfectly honest. That deep dive, right? Pump and hit you, which is interesting. Somebody put on a vest and they went to VR chat and they had people give them hugs. Do you know Cyan and Fiona? Have you heard of Cyan and Fiona?
Don't use anybody's extra information for advertising. We have
Okay.
all the commitment, all the motion data, all of your hand tracking, all of your mic data. None of it is used for correct.
That's excellent, yeah.
Thank you, yes.
It's good to hear another perspective on that. Yeah, we don't have, Facebook obviously closely guarded secrets. We don't get to see behind the curtain too much. We'll go right there.
Real quick.
Oh, sorry. We'll come back to you. We'll be here a while. Gentleman in the white mask? Yeah, go ahead.
Is USS Draco still available?
It is. In fact, we're presenting from it right now. So it's here all year round. I'll have in the QR code. I'll have a link to it. So you guys want to go check it out? You're more than welcome to. I'd love to have some more visitors. It'd be great. Blue mask. Yeah.
So after being in the metaverse or VR or whatever you want to call it for a while, if you've done a long session or you've done many throughout a week or something, do you find interacting in the real world different? And do you find yourself, your expectations of reality altered at all?
That's a really good question. I think actually it's the other way around. I like to use the idea of or the metaphor of your sea legs. So when you first put the headset on, most people can only stay in for about 10 or 15 minutes. You've got to get your inner ear synchronized and you kind of feel off and sick. And the more time you spend in VR, the easier it becomes. I mean, I do 8-hour play sessions or longer with some of my friends. The batteries run out and I'm plugging everything in. And now as far as, how does that affect my real world? It's actually kind of novel. I'll be partying, hanging out with my friends. I need to refill my drink. I just pop this headset off and I'm just instantly transported from some underground ocean club to my kitchen to get, another beer or something like that. But then as soon as I put that headset on, my friends are all there just waiting for me. So I think it just feels like teleportation to me. It doesn't do anything negative to the real world. It just makes that transition very smooth.
Now, I will say for me, like last night in some of the parties, I really wish I could have adjusted world volume.
He wanted to turn last night's music on.
Last night, yeah.
You were at that open casket party?
Yeah. Oh, open casket party was great, yeah.
Other questions? Okay, I'll come back to you.
I just have a quick comment.
Okay.
For those of you who don't have Oculus in the store, every single game or experience has a comfort level.
Yeah.
There are a number of free experiences that you can sort of test yourself out. A really good one that's free is called Roller Coaster. It's basically just 4 roller coasters in really weird scenarios. Check it out. I recommend for if you get motion sickness, sit down in a chair. That helps a lot.
Yeah, you make a very good point too, right? That there's different levels of immersion. Like you usually want to get someone sitting down their first time so they don't fall over. Like flight simulators or racing simulators are actually really good for that. As you get your VR legs, you can do more crazy things. I mean, one of my friends is a dancer in VR, and so like some of those people actually have poles in their room, and you'll see somebody just flip upside down and start spinning randomly in space. It's very cool. Rainbow? Yeah.
So one of the things that I thought was interesting, and you brought this up, was that Apple and Google and all, they controlled, they made, when we first got to the internet, they controlled that transition.
Yeah.
So I thought it was interesting that when Oculus came out, and we added vision and hearing and stuff, that it didn't come from like say Orlando, where you've got like Disney and the military, and their whole thing is like finding ways to simulate things. So I thought, any thoughts on maybe why that is, and then as we're getting into like gloves and haptic suits, and is that going to continue to come out of like Silicon Valley primarily, or somewhere that's where they do? Yeah, I was just confused that it didn't come out of somewhere where like
Yeah, like how NASA gave us like dehydrated ice cream
Exactly.
and stuff. Yeah. No, that's a really good question. So
repeat the question for that.
Oh yeah. So the question was basically, the military and like Disney, for example, right? They're huge in this commercial space, entertainment, right? Why aren't they the ones leading? Why was it just some kids in a garage, making an Oculus Quest? And do we think we'll see the military contribute more to, future advances? I'm not an expert. I'm not in the military. I'm not really the right person. But if I want to speculate about it, I think that VR initially was seen as, they tried it in the 80s and it was real bad. It turned everybody off, and so. The military is always doing stuff like this. I'm pretty sure they have some lab somewhere where they're working on that kind of stuff, but I'm sure it's for like remote drone controls or something like that, right? But also with government too, a lot of times we'll just get $10 million thrown at a problem and nothing will ever come of it, right? They'll never actually produce a product. But with these hungry startups that have to live and die by this technology, this was the opportunity they were waiting for. As soon as the mobile phones got small enough and they could use the technology and it wouldn't be 10 pounds on somebody's head and make them sick, I think that's why we're seeing it. Now, as far as the future, like I've seen those big walking 2-dimensional treadmills like Ready Player One, but they weigh like 1,000 pounds and they're for like, you can only go like a mile an hour, and they've got a tether review and stuff like that. So I think the consumer is going to drive it. Now Disney, interestingly enough, they're a little slow on the uptake on this, but they partnered. There's a big marketplace in VR called VCAT. Started in Japan, and last year Disney actually partnered with them, and so in their official world, you could go to the Disney store, and of course, with being Disney, you had to like sign all this end-user license agreement before I could walk in through the door. But they had like models. There's like an Iron Man model because they own Marvel and everything, and you could click on it, and it would take you to a website. You could buy it and stuff. So I think Disney's getting wise, but they're probably going to sit back and just milk the software side of things because that's where they're heavily invested. I mean, the theme park stuff for sure, and we've seen. There have been some theme park experiences that have come and gone. I've got a couple friends in the audience who have gone like out in Vegas and stuff. I didn't get a chance to try it, but it was really cool because they would like map the entire room. And so if you saw a wall in real life, you could touch it, right? But those are commercial and larger. I think the consumer space has always been a little different, and we'll kind of see that emerge. Now, if the military comes out with some awesome tech and they want to declassify it, I'm sure we'll all benefit, but I think this will still be largely driven by the consumer market for the next decade.
I mean, I'm actually a little optimistic about it. Like, I'd like to think that this is actually the product of just a growing maker community. Because as makers, like people working out of their garages or basement, the amount of tech available to you is actually getting quite amazing. I mean, microprocessors, cost a couple of dollars now. You saw like the mask we made, like custom coded, and
Okay.
so I would like to think that this is the product of just a robust maker community and people getting more adventurous and kind of flexing those skills. So I'd like to see, I'd like to see more hardware innovation coming out of the garages by people who care about what's going on, not necessarily people who are just in it for $1.
Not to say people that work in that field aren't just in it, but
Right.
these corporations, they exist to make money, yeah.
Right.
Cool.
QR code?
Oh yeah, we'll get there in just a second. Oh yeah, actually, yeah, let me do that. You can answer the next question.
Yes. Black shirt, yes.
This is kind of a two-parter. So kind of following off of that comment about maker stuff, what's your favorite piece of like DIY setup or like equipment that you've heard about someone doing in VR so far?
Oh geez. There's so much. So there's a lot of DIYers, working on locomotion, and they're trying lots and lots of different approaches to the problem. You can see a lot of them publish their tests and their, various videos on YouTube. So for myself, because I use a wired headset.
Attach it. And then I've also got a battery pack from Rebuff Reality. Now this is a little overpriced. You can just do what I did with my girlfriend's headset and just take a cheap battery and zip tie it. And what's great about it is it's a counterweight. So with this, all the electronics and battery kind of lean it down, but this counterweight's it now. It feels very comfortable. And I can play for about 6 hours, 7 hours before I need to charge this. Now they're a little expensive. This was like $100 for the add-ons, but Amazon's now flooded with a lot of competitors. You can probably get out for $50. So if you buy one of these Quest 2, plan on spending another $50 to make it comfortable. Because the strap that comes with the Quest 2 is cloth and it cuts into your ear. It's not very comfortable at all. So just budget a little bit extra.
Who haven't we asked yet?
All right, point.
Batman mask.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
When you're in the club, is every avatar that you encounter an actual person somewhere?
Not necessarily, but in practice, yes. So I don't have it on the screen now, but if you noticed during our presentation, there were people walking behind us.
Yes.
Those are all fake NPCs that I coded to feel like it. But when you're in a club, right, it could be a mix of, you might have. So actually, we went to a big club, a big festival, a 3-day music festival last weekend called Slide Fest. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, and it was under the ocean, and so there weren't humans walking around, but there were whales and dolphins swimming by and stuff, right?
Is some human actually stuck being a bartender or being the...
Only if they want to role play is that, yeah.
Yeah. Well, so that image we showed you of Lolly PD when we were talking about the bouncers, that's actually a community of role players. So
The bouncers were real people.
Bouncers are real?
Yeah.
Change your avatars to match whatever the theme of the party was?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
So we even provided a few avatars.
It'll look exactly like this.
Yeah.
What do y'all kind of think or see? Are we gonna kind of peak on how this looks like a Nintendo 64 right now?
Sure.
Are we gonna kind of peak on how actual real this will we'll be able to get something that's light enough to put
That's a
on my
great
face?
question. Yeah. So there are two paths you talked about, right? You talked about Moore's Law, which is the speed of, for those of you who don't know, it's the idea that the number of transistors in a chip roughly doubles every 18 months and has for the last 30 years. So more transistors, and the size stays the same. So you're able to do more computational power, per watt. So that's one aspect of things. The second one he was talking about was photorealism. So the trick with these headsets is you want to pack enough power into them so that they're not hot, they're not heavy, and the battery lasts long enough. So the current pushes right now are similar to what Apple's done. If you go buy an Apple MacBook today, it won't have your traditional Intel chip. It'll have a piece of M1 silicon or M2 silicon they built. And that's RISC architecture, which you might have heard that buzzword in the 90s. It's the idea that the chipsets will change and be more power efficient. So that's one avenue they need to solve. We need to be able to push more pixels with smaller chips that take less and less power. In fact, this is powered by what's called an XR2 chip. It's actually the same kind of chips that people find in their cell phones, because those can run all day on just a little battery, right? Now the second thing with optics and field of view and vision and stuff like that, these use what are called Fresnel lenses. If you've ever seen a lighthouse where you sort of see a lens and it's got these juts in them, they use that to make the world to render that screen, right? Now that's the coolest tech on the market, but it's a little thick. It's better than a big lens, but it's about yay thick. The next biggest thing that's not even on the market yet, but we think it's coming out this year, are called pancake lenses. So they figured out a way to make the lens this thin, but the trade-off is that 90% of the light is lost in through the lens. So they're having to figure out how to make their displays, 8 or 9 times brighter and stuff. So you're gonna see this give and take over the next 10, 20 years between portability and power, but also fidelity, which is the same thing you saw in the mobile phone market the last 10 years. I don't know if we'll ever get to photorealism. Might just be easier to plug something into our head like the Matrix eventually, because then you just bypass the interface of our weak eyes and hands entirely, But I think the next 10 years you'll just see this sort of fight for portability and size and fidelity. And then one other thing I forgot to mention was field of view. So right now at this Quest, it looks like you got, it's not bad, it's not like a periscope, but you definitely can't feel on the side. Better and better, once you can get to that point of peripheral vision, you can feel like it'll feel really real. So we're getting close to that, but we're not there yet. Great question. I know I talked forever. Any others? Yeah.
I study VR in college, and I just want to know for people who do VR all the time, what would you like to see next? What would be the thing that you would love to see if it came out next week?
Like anything?
Yeah, like anything VR.
Low cost, cheap locomotion.
Absolutely.
So I pre-ordered one of those slide mills that we showed. I've never tried. Well, I tried one once in Hong Kong years ago, and it was terrible. But that was 6-7 years ago. So I've ordered one. It's coming from China. It's on a boat right now. I'll probably try it out. So maybe this time next year, I'll have a breakdown of what slide mills are like. I've actually, again, on this QR code, take a photo if you want. I've linked to some good YouTubers, Thrill Seeker and Fia, Beard Headshots. They do a lot of product reviews, and one of them got an early access one, and they sort of talk about it. But that's what I'd love to see, because when the first headsets came out, there was no hand controller. You just had the headset and maybe a joystick, right? So you could play your flight sims and stuff. And then it was an add-on. And I remember the first time I bought these add-ons, and I go into this demo and I have hands. I mean, they're a little weird, right? It's still got a joystick on it and buttons and stuff, but if I want to close my hands and pick something up, I just do this, and I was able to pick up and throw things. That blew my mind. Yeah. I think locomotion, being able to walk across a room without just pushing a joystick, is going to be the next big thing for me. So that's what I really, really want to see. And I hope that's where this technology moves.
Yeah, I mean, that'll have actually really interesting implications, especially for video games.
Yeah.
So right now, you're in some open world game, you just push that joystick all the way forward and your character's running 30 miles carrying 100 pounds. Now, if you actually had to walk that distance, it's going to dramatically affect the choices you make in game.
People will start riding the horses in Skyrim. That's teleporting everywhere.
Yeah. So yes, locomotion by all means.
Yeah.
And anybody else?
Yeah, what's up?
Yeah, so you did briefly mention Neos and Chill Out. Do you have any events that you know of inside of Neos and Chill Out to release those platforms?
So I'll be perfectly honest, I haven't tried them yet. I mean, I've researched them. The question is, we mentioned VR Chat's the Metaverse of choice for us, but there are other competitors like Neos VR and Chill Out VR, and he asked if there were other events as well. Now, I will say, I know that Neos is going through a bit of some drama right now with their co-creators. You've probably heard the Great Divorce or whatever, and so I don't know. But their tool chain is incredibly, you could easily build a club in there, I think. Chill Out VR is probably the more stable competitor, but their SDK isn't as good as VR Chat. So VR Chat, if you're a programmer, they have their own meta programming language called Udon, so I can actually code things like I could in C# and it will actually run. Chill Out VR isn't there yet, so while you could have a basic club system, one of the cool things about VR Chat we didn't talk about is the audio systems actually hook into the avatars. So I've got an avatar that glows, my eyes will glow at the beat of the music and stuff. So some of those nice rave quality of life things people expect, they're not there in the competitors yet. But I think if they could catch up, then I think you'll see an expansion of sorts. And competition is great, so we hope that happens. Cool.
Is CDR still using dynamic bones?
Is Chill Out VR using it? Probably. I know that, because VR Chat just got rid of Dynamic Bones a month ago and did their own bespoke. Yeah. But I mean, if I was a team of 3 people, Chill Out VR's got 4 employees. They're super small. So of course they're going to use as many off-the-shelf components. And even though Dynamic Bones, for those of you who don't know, it determines how the bones relate to kinematics, right? How if you move your wrist a certain way, it knows to turn your elbow and everything. And so it's not a very high performance piece of software. So if you've got 100 people in the world, your frame rate gets all crappy and everything's kind of like a slideshow. But it's $100 or whatever, right? So I could see why a small startup with no money would use an off-the-shelf component. So, but maybe one day they'll write their own IK toolchain. Who knows? Yep.
Are are any of the VR hardware available to consumers locked out of certain software sets?
It's a good question. The question is any of the hardware locked out of certain software? And the answer is yes, but only with Facebook. So Facebook has their own marketplace, or Oculus marketplace, and so and of course, Apple does this too, right? They'll pay certain VR developers to have exclusives for their hardware. So recently, someone made a really cool, well, it was Capcom. They remade Resident Evil 4 in virtual reality. It's only available on this headset. It won't even work on the old headset that I have from like 3 years ago. You have to have the newest and latest and greatest. They've also got some PC VR experiences that are Facebook only. But of course, some clever hackers have written software called Revive, and there's some other ones that allow you to just run it anyway. It just kind of fools your computer into thinking it's running a Quest. But yeah, there is some lockout. Vendor lockout's always going to be a thing in the current era. We see it with mobile technology. So cool. You guys have awesome questions, by the way. These are really good. Any other ones? Yeah.
Another question. So, as a software engineer, what do you think VR chat could be doing better?
Question is, as a software engineer, what do you think VR chat could be doing better? I think you're seeing it right now. Have you been following like the drama with easy anti-cheat and stuff like that?
A little bit.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, there has been a healthy modding community in VR chat. So a good example is, if I'm in a club with 80 people and I'm surrounded and I only want to hear my 3 friends around me, I could install a mod that would let me like literally turn everybody off with this cool little cone. And so for the last 2 or 3 years, people have been building all these fun things. A deaf community member built some software where they could like type and it could go above their head, and all these sort of quality of life mods. Unfortunately, some assholes built code that will like crash clients by shooting them with laser guns and stuff. So recently, VR Chat implemented an anti-cheat solution that really upset the community. But they have been doing their damnedest over the last month or two to take all these mods that the community already loved and expected to have, and then actually bring them in. So that audio mod I was talking about, they've now got a feature called earmuffs that they have that basically does the same thing, right? So I think that as a software engineer, they're doing what their community wants them to do for quality of life improvements, and I think that's probably going to keep them busy for like the next 6 to 9 months, maybe a year. And then after that, they can do whatever they want on the roadmap. But I think that's what they're going to work on. Awesome. Any other questions? There's no other panel after this. We can keep going. Yeah, go ahead.
How do you feel about the whole rumor? Okay, this is a rumor that's been going for a while. The whole game engine switch situation, where it's a rumor where basically they're going to go from Unity to something else.
Probably Unreal, right?
All the other charts were done.
Yeah. Well, not just that, but the worlds. I don't think it's going to happen. So again, for those who aren't aware, in modern, when you're playing video games, generally they're going to be made on 1 of 2 platforms. One called Unity and one called Unreal. Epic, the guys who make Fortnite, they own the Unreal Engine. Unity is some small company. There's other private engines. Other companies build their own. But anyway, it's what powers the game. Now, VR Chat has always been built on Unity. And so there is a rumor that they might switch because Unreal has certain things that are maybe better for programmers than Unity. But I don't think they're going to do it. And here's why. When I make a world, like with Draco, we build it, and then we upload to their server, right? So when you guys visit, you're not visiting a VR Chat's world per se, you're using their engine to visit my world that I've loaded. So if they switch to Unreal, overnight, that content would cease to work, and user-created content is 99.9% of their entire platform. Everything you saw on the screen today, every screenshot I showed you, some random human out there who isn't getting paid built that. Except maybe the Ferality people, I think they get paid for that. So if they did something like that, they would be killing themselves because their entire community, some of the most popular worlds, one world in particular, the creators died a couple years ago. And it's very popular, it's called Treehouse in the Shade. So who's going to rebuild that world, right? I mean, so I don't think they would do that. I think it would kill their company overnight. So I think for now it's going to be good.
It's all you can generate content.
Exactly, yeah. Awesome question. Anything else? Yeah.
A little off topic. Oculus games, do you guys have any favorites? Any that you would recommend?
Oh yeah. Man, there's a lot. Like you mean just Oculus specifically, or just any VR games?
Like, could be any, but like Vader Immortal, Beat Saber, etc.
Vader Immortal was super fun. It felt like a glorified Disney ride, but it was still cool. Like Darth Vader walks in this, uses a lightsaber to open this door and walks up to you. He's 7 feet tall, and you're looking at it like this, and you feel like he's there, breathing into you. I like that. Beat Saber is obviously a lot of fun. I like rhythm games. It's very popular. Resident Evil 4 was fun, but horror genre is not really my favorite. But Half-Life Alyx, if you guys have heard about that, excellent game. Valve generally is always on the forefront of cutting technology. You know, they made Half-Life and everything. So that was a lot of fun to play. Racing sims, I like Assetto Corsa. I've got a steering wheel I can actually shift and drive, and I feel like I'm in a car. So a lot of those experiences. I've got a friend here that loves puzzle games, and that just recently played Myst and went through that. It's old 90s port, right? And then escape room games and stuff. So we talked about social VR, but any genre, if you want to go shoot people in the head, Squadrons, it reminded me of, yeah, like I grew up playing X-Wing and TIE Fighter, so, you know, I loved it. It was very nice. It was well done. Yeah. Cool. Awesome question. Anything else? All right, then. You guys are kick-ass audience. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, you can stick around here. We'll unpack them for a little while.